Hey everyone, so today we're going to take a look at three-sum problem. This problem is almost similar to two-sum problems, so if you have any questions throughout this video, make sure you go and see two-sum problems. You don't necessarily need to know, but if we're just going to use the same principles and should be fairly straightforward. So what is this problem? We are given an array and we're supposed to find arrays of three elements where the sum of those elements would amount to 0, right? So for in this case we have -1, and then a +2, which when we add up is 0. There's also a few conditions noting that we're not supposed to have duplicate triplets. For example, we're not supposed to have another list where we have -1, and 2. So that's one of the conditions, and we shouldn't have like two, so we shouldn't have 0 and then another 0 in the same list. So from the same location, we shouldn't have that. We should have only one element in the list at that for that list, right? So it's kind of like that. So it's like I shouldn't be equal to j and j shouldn't be equal to k and things like that. So the way that we're going to solve this problem is by sorting this array and then iterating through every single one of those elements and having two different pointers at the same time. So we would sort the array and then we would start from the very first element, and then we would have another pointer right here, for example like low, and then another pointer here at the end of the array called high. And then the way that we would identify triplets is by adding up the elements at this position and at the end, which is at high pointer, and we would see if adding up both the very first element that we're iterating through and low and high would give us 0. If it did, we would just add it to the list. If it didn't, we would just increment low and then we would decrement high based on if we need a higher value or lower value and things like that. So I think it'll make a lot more sense when I code this out. So let's just start coding the solution out. We're just going to sort the array first. So I'm just going to do array.sort nums, and yeah, so we can just start with the iteration here. I is equal to 0, I is less than nums dot length. We don't need to go all the way to the end, just because this is the last string cut or the last combination that we would check. There's really no point in going till the very end because we don't have any value after that. So that's why I'm doing -2 here, and then I++, and then we would need two different pointers at this point. So I'm just gonna do int low, which is going to be i+1 because we need to start at the next position from I, and then int high, which is always going to be the last element in the array, right? So I'm just going to do alien nums dot ph dot nums dot length -1, and then we would have another if condition to check if I is equal to 0 or if I is greater than 0, and if nums of I -1 is not equal to nums of I, meaning that the value of I is a different number from the value that we had before, just to make sure that we're not processing duplicate values, right? So in this case, if we have -1 here and then we have another -1 here, we don't really have to process that. We can just skip over to the next element. So what we need to do at this point is to have another while loop, and then we need to check if low is less than high, and then we need to check if right, so we need to check if something we need to check here. Oh yeah, I just realized that we need to have another integer called sum, which is basically 0 minus nums of I, i.e. the value that we need from low and high, right? So what we would check here if its sum is equal to nums of low plus nums of high, and then if it is if we did find the correct value, we would just need to add it to the result list. So I'm just gonna create a result array of arrays, and then we can just add it to that. We have a really good method in Java, called arrays. Oh, do they have 3 R's? Yep. As list, and then we would just pass in nums of I, nums of low, and nums of another high. Yep. And we would need to have another loop so that we don't take the another duplicate value for low or high. And the way that we would do it is by having while low is less than high, and nums of low is equal to nums of low plus 1. We just do low plus plus, and we would just need to do the same thing for high. So I'm just gonna copy this and then do if high minus 1, just negative. And then once we identified, so once we go to a point where the next low and the next high is not duplicate, we would just move over to that value. So another case that might happen in this if condition is if the sum value is greater than the sum of low and high. In that case, what we need is higher than what we've calculated. So in that case, we would need to bring down high so we get a lower value. And the other condition is, the other way around. We would just increment low. And I think that should be it. So I'm just gonna return result and see if I get just gonna sum it. I just realized that I made a few mistakes here. We're not supposed to check if sum is, we can, it's going to be the other way around, but basically we would need to add these two up, and we need to check if it's, if it's greater than sum. So if the value that we calculated is greater than what we need, we would reduce the higher values, right? So let's see if it, that's going to sum it again. Alright, so yeah, that passed. So it's basically iterating through every single values, making sure that we don't have duplicates, and then we have two different pointers, and then we bring it closer and closer and closer and see if it matches the sum. If it does, we get the same value, we add it to the result. If we don't, we try to identify the next non-duplicate value and then do the same check again. Alright guys, see you later with another solution.